Hey guys, lots of gaming news to go through this week, so I'm not going to blabber with a long intro. Let's just jump into it. Our first story is actually out of Ubisoft, and it specifically ties into their new mod, automatic generation, and cleaning tools that they've been pushing, where based on what you type into the chat or what you say into the chat, those types of things, it's going to automatically, instead of just clear out those words or put little asterisks in the place of them or whatever they do, it will now automatically instill a 27-minute ban, if not longer, and it can even lead to permanent banning from the game that you're playing just because you type in a naughty word into the chat and try to send it. So, understandably, this has ticked a lot of people off. A lot of people are freaking out, thinking that Ubisoft is now like going all the way with censorship and they're getting crazy. And I understand that, but I want to frame this in a realistic and empathetic way. Like I want us to look at it from Ubisoft's perspective and then look at it from our perspective and see if we can come to a middle point, because I think we can. Specifically, if you look at it from Ubisoft's perspective, their video games, especially the ones that have online integration, or specifically the ones that have online integration, they are games which have a lot of people chatting, and understandably, and as you would expect, there's a lot of people on there that find it hilarious to say really gross, disgusting things into the chat, into the voice chat, into the text chat, all over the place, because gamers find that stuff funny, and that's okay. And of course, like, they are probably a very small minority of the total number of players playing those games, but because they're so vocal with their stupidity, it tends to be the only thing that we really remember. So Ubisoft's looking at that. They see that most people's gaming experiences are not improved by that sort of thing. Like when I sit down to play The Division or something, my experience is not improved by running across a 13-year-old who's like just saying the N-word 50 times in a row because he thinks it's really funny. Like, that doesn't improve my experience. Should you have the right to say that? Sure, I don't care, but I'm going to mute you and I'm going to try to play the game that I'm trying to play. So I understand what Ubisoft is saying when they want to fix that issue. And if their approach to fixing that issue is moderation, okay, well, we need to be very, very clear about this. And this is where the gamer perspective has to come out, because it's on a very slippery slope. Because, for instance, in this, they have a single automation bot which looks at the chat and will clear out certain words, but more specifically will ban you if those words are typed in. And this gets really messy when you consider that across the world there's many different languages, and a lot of slurs, for instance, in the US or in France or where have you, they are based from actual words that aren't necessarily slang in other countries. So I don't want to get too specific, otherwise, YouTube's gonna flag this video, take it down, and all sorts of things, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. The word for black, for instance, there's a root word from a Latin base and from a Spanish base, and in American culture that can be adjusted and tweaked to the point where that becomes offensive and that's a slur. But in Spain, that word is not offensive. That's just the literal word for black. So it wouldn't actually be offensive. But according to this system, both players, the one that's trying to be vindictive and evil with it, is going to get banned in the same way that somebody just describing a black wall would also get banned. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And this is the issue, is once you start banning players for simply uttering a word or for typing in a series of characters, it gets very, very slippery, because we're not just talking about that word being pulled out from the chat and then the player keeps going. We're talking about that player being banned for at least half an hour, if not longer, if they repeatedly do it, accidentally or purposefully otherwise. And so if we're looking at this as an attempted fix to the problem, it doesn't really work, especially because there's other fixes to the problem that have not just been suggested, but that have been implemented, such as muting that opposing player and maybe even leaving the match, trying to find another match to go to if they're really annoying you or really offending you, whatever it is. There are already fixes and solutions in place. There's no need for us to go all the way to censorship and cutting out and banning people based on something that they may purposefully or accidentally say. So it just doesn't really make sense. It's not a good solution. It's not a good fix, but it does look like Ubisoft is doubling down on it, and they're going to keep pushing it and it's sticking around. So censorship seems to be here to stay for Ubisoft titles, like it or not. When I play online games, I don't tend to get super into the text chat, so for me this doesn't mean a whole lot, but I do know some people who are crazy into it, and they're worried that this is going to lead to a lot of fun being sucked out of it. Maybe the fix is like you add some servers, like you check a box in the settings and it's just anything goes. It's like a not safe for work server. You can say or do whatever you want. You can still mute other players and do that stuff, but it's not going to automatically ban you or cut you out. I don't know if that's where they're going, if they're open to doing that sort of thing. More than anything, it seems like they're just looking to clean up their servers, clean up their games, and they don't really care if it offends people they view as not their target audience, or not their audience that they would like to have playing their games. So I don't really like this measure. I don't think it works. I don't think it does what it sets out to do, but I understand why they're trying to do it. It doesn't directly affect me. Of course, it's Ubisoft's right to alter their game as they see fit, but still, it doesn't mean that we have to like it. So that's just my attempt to frame everything evenly and even-handedly, but I do want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you even care? Is this something you're happy to see? Let me know in the comment section below. I will be reading through them. But moving on to the next story. So Konami has just shut down a fan remake of PT. If you didn't ever play PT, basically it was a sort of horror teaser demo thing on the PS4 back in 2015. I think like March or April of 2015 is when it was out. And it was meant to show off as a teaser a Silent Hills game that was up and coming from Hideo Kojima and Norman Reedus or however it's pronounced, and Guillermo del Toro and all these guys, who of course now are working on Death Stranding, but this was the project that brought them together and started that. However, basically Kojima and Konami, the company, they started butting heads, and then the project was canceled. The demo was pulled. Kojima left, and it was super dramatic and terrible. They didn't let him go to E3 to represent his company. It was a mess. Now he's with Death Stranding. He's working on that with Sony, and it seems to be going well, even though it's super, super weird. But what is happening is that a little modder who is 17 years old, let me see if I can find his name on this article. He's 17 years old. He goes by Kimsar, I think. Qimsar. He's 17 years old, and he's been working on a remake of this, and he's put in, by his count, about 180 hours. So he's put in like a month and a half, 2 months of good hard work on this project, and that's cool. So, good on him. But what happened is that Konami went and they filed a cease and desist order telling him to pull the demo off of all distribution services. He had to stop making it because it was considered to be their intellectual property, and he didn't have the right to remake it and distribute it. But they were so impressed by the work that he did, and the people in the office were actually enjoying the remake that he was doing so much, they offered him an internship at Konami. So this guy who just got a cease and desist from Konami was just offered an internship as a result of his work, which is, I guess, sort of a happy ending to the story, maybe, or it's just negative and terrible. I don't know. A lot of people were freaking out, saying that, like, oh, they shouldn't have canceled the remake. Who cares? Like, they're not making the game. Why do they care if we remake a demo for a game that doesn't exist? I understand that. Like, of course, legally they have the right to file a cease and desist because they did. And because it is their intellectual property, you don't have a right to fully remake what somebody else created just because they aren't working on it anymore. That doesn't really work. But I do understand the more pro-consumer approach, which is, listen, fans loved that demo so much that they're willing to work for hundreds of hours on a remake project just so that they can play it again and experience it again because you've taken it off of your distribution services. That's a great compliment to the people over at Konami. They should be celebrating that. But of course, there's a lot more that goes into it. I'm sure there's a lot of crap with Kojima and with the Silent Hills people. I think there's a lot of things that go into this that we potentially aren't seeing. It's not as simple as just leaving it up. So I understand it kind of has to come down, as frustrating and as annoying as it is. You'll still probably see this continue to get worked on, and it'll probably be picked up by another team and distributed out like deep in the web somewhere, and it'll still happen and it'll still be out there. But it is frustrating because it was a really cool demo. I don't know if you ever played it, but it was a really cool demo and it was exciting and interesting. People were excited for it. But then just because Kojima and Konami butted heads on something, no one really knows what, even to this day, it just kind of died out and they cut it off and ended it. And it's too bad because obviously the interest is still there, even to this day. So it just kind of sucks. But at least the kid got an internship offer and might eventually be working at Konami. So I guess that's a good happy ending. I guess that's good. I don't know. Let me know. The next story is that Germany is going to start regulating pre-orders for video games, specifically because according to some pre-orders, you can purchase a game like pre-order it way before it's announced. So before it even like has a set release date, you can pre-order it, put some money down, and then hold a copy of it until it's released. And even if that game is like Crackdown and it takes a decade to release, in theory, you should still get the game that you pre-ordered. But according to the laws, you might not even receive that copy of the game. So Germany's trying to rework that and get it to the point where you can't just pre-order or offer a pre-order game without set release dates or something like that. Now, because there's loopholes, it doesn't, like this law that Germany is proposing doesn't actually do anything, because all a developer has to do is sell a pre-order based on an estimated release date, and they could write the estimated release date as the year 2500, and that would still, under the law, be good enough to still sell a pre-release copy. So it doesn't really make sense. This is the classic example. Like, we all want legislation to fix our problems. We all want like governments to step in and fix the naughty big business types, but it doesn't actually work. Like the reason these guys are big business wealthy types is because they're smart and they know what they're doing. It's like, oh, you're going to cut off our pre-orders so we can't sell them anymore without its dedicated release date. Okay, we'll just estimate it comes out in the year 2500, and then once we know when the game's coming out, we'll pull that date back and adjust it, and basically legally it'll just be as if you were getting the game early, so we're actually doing you a favor. So it doesn't actually make sense. And at the end of the day, like, I don't have a lot of sympathy. I know I'm a bad person for saying this. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people that pre-order games like before it's even announced as to when it's releasing. Pre-order Fallout 4, go for it. You know, they announce when it's coming out. It's going to have a beta if you pre-order. I don't like, go for it. But if you pre-order like a copy of Crackdown and you did that back at launch or back when they first announced it, yeah, no, you should have canceled that a long time ago. Like, I don't have a lot of sympathy if GameStop takes you for a ride after that whole process. So like, pre-ordering in general doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so when I hear stories of people that are getting taken advantage of by clearly slimy companies, just because like you went through the process of buying a pre-order for a game that you should have known and didn't have a dedicated release schedule, I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. I know I'm a bad person. Tell me in the comments. I suck. I'm awful. And the last thing I want to talk about is a story that actually is going around Reddit, and some other news journals and Twitter's been talking about it. And that's specifically about the Nintendo Switch. So I have a Switch. I got it, I think, like May of 2017. It wasn't like right at launch, but it was a little bit after. I had to run around and try to find one. It was like a huge hassle. It was very hard to get one, even then. But I've had it for a while. I love it. It's great. I've been playing Octopath Traveler. Highly recommend it, just on the 2.5, 3 hours I put into it so far. Might even do like a critique on it. I highly recommend that game. It's killer. But I'm still using it to this day. Only hardware defects and things I've run into have been on the Joy-Cons. So my original Joy-Cons were the gray ones, and when you hit the joystick like just up and to the left, it skipped a little bit. and it's hard to describe, but it's like a broken joystick on a controller. It just doesn't feel right, and it kind of snaps and it clicks. It's broken. So I got a new Joy-Con, problem solved, whatever. I used it for a year. I can understand that maybe the controller needs a replacement. I'll get past it. I'll just use that one for parties. The kickstand is just like fully broken. I had to tape it in place because if you don't, it just slides and freely hangs. It doesn't snap into place. So that's something I ran into. Slight chipping, like up by the power button. You can't see it on the camera, but there's a very slight chip. But in general, it's held up very, very, very well. I'm actually pleasantly surprised considering it is a portable device. Now, I'm not a heavy user on my electronics. I take care of them. I'm delicate with, like, they're delicate electronics. I'm going to treat them as such. So I'm not the best, like, empirical example of your mainstream consumer, but I have not run into many hardware issues. On Twitter and Reddit and all of these places, people are describing and showing pictures of horribly mutated and altered switches that have, like, up by the heat pipes, melted plastic, like the power connectors loose in the socket, the speakers are dying, and like where the Joy-Con slide in is chipped, and like they look as though you threw them down a flight of stairs. And maybe that it did happen. Like, we're looking at people on the internet, maybe they did actually drop their Switch down a stack of stairs. You don't know, but it does seem to be a very common issue that there are significant hardware faults going through the Switches after about a year and a half of ownership. So like that, in general, if we see it on any physical hardware product, we tend to notice it, and we go to the manufacturer, say, hey, are you going to offer repair services? We're willing to even pay for repairs because, of course, we've owned these, we've used them, but are you going to offer those services for repairs? And so far, Nintendo has said, no, this is not a manufacturer defect. This is a defect of use. If you're seeing plastic chip, it means you're playing it for an inordinate amount of time, and it's heating to the point where it's swelling and contracting. It's melting plastic. Like, you have to really misuse it to get to that point. If you're seeing bending, that's because you are like your dock is like you're playing it for too long. Like, they have excuses for everything as they go down, and that's fine. Like, they're right. If you are really delicate and careful with the device, it's going to last longer. That's true. But we would at least hope and expect hardware repairs to be offered, and they did offer it. They said we can repair them through like our subsidiary companies. The issue being, to repair just the body of a Nintendo Switch is going to run you roughly $250. The issue being, you can get a new Nintendo Switch with 2 Joy-Cons, a dock, the little like Joy-Con grip thing, whatever they call it, and potentially even a game or two, and an SD card for it if you watch the bundles on like Amazon and Best Buy and those places. All for $300. So at that point, why repair your old one that's crappy and damaged when you could just buy a whole new Switch and move over to that one? The only potential hiccup would be save files, but that's going to be true even if you get that old one repaired, so you might as well just buy a new one. So either way, you kind of run into trouble, but this is what we get with portable devices. I don't think anybody expects anything differently, or at least if you do, you shouldn't, because like my phone, I don't expect crazy durability from a phone that I'm taking with me in my pocket every day of my life and using it constantly. The Switch, I don't use it that much, but it is a portable device. I'm taking it with me places on car trips or plane flights and things like that. So I don't expect it to hold up for years and years in impeccable condition like a PS4 that's sitting on my desk or a PS4 Pro that's out in the living room. Like, I don't expect it to hold up in that same way, and I don't think anybody else should. So I don't, like, once again, maybe the theme of today's episode is that I don't tend to feel much sympathy for people like that. But like, if your thing has gotten so beat up because you're using it crazy heavily, I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. I think that's expected. You know, it's a $300 plasticky electronic device. It's gonna break apart. Really, I think most people who use their Switch super heavily should factor in that they're gonna probably be buying a new one once every year and a half, 2 years. Just like with a phone, you tend to buy a new one if you're hard on them every 2 years. So Maybe I'm being stupid by saying that, but that's just my estimation of how a portable device tends to work in the modern day. But yeah, no, lots of good news topics. And again, like with all of this said, I want to say thank you for watching and thank you for sticking with me through these news stories. I enjoy talking about this stuff. We used to do it weekly on Talk Gaming, the podcast that we did, and that's going to come back. It will come back. For those of you who watched the last episode of Talk Gaming or have been following me on Twitter or the Discord, I talked a little bit about this, but basically I have a landlord who went and started messing with our cable box where everything connects into the pole. He was getting slightly slower speeds, so he thought if he could alter it, he might get improved speeds. That's all I'll say. But in the process of doing that, which by the way is not allowed whatsoever. You're not allowed to tweak cable boxes without that's something only the repair technicians from the cable company are supposed to be doing. Like, you have to break a seal in order to get into it, which is why they put the seals there, so they can find out if it's been tampered with. Anyway, he tampered with it, and in the process configured some lines and screwed some stuff up so that now my signal strength for the internet coming in off of the tower is like blazing fast when it works, but then the signal strength will dip to like negative 55 dB. It'll get super crappy and unstable. The modem will freak out and shut itself off, and then it'll reboot automatically. And there's no way of hard wiring and hard fixing that. That's just something the modem automatically does. So, and bear in mind, I'm using a business class modem and router. There is no reason I should be having any of these issues. So, we used to be able to just live stream the show every week, and now we can't really do that because it's all fried and broken. Good news is I am moving July 31st, so I'll be in a new place starting in August, and I will be able to reconfigure a studio, a space to work on that. I'm still not sure how that layout will work, but hopefully we can make something cool. And the new place has much more tech savvy people around it, and they will not be messing with cable boxes without significant reason or purpose. So all of that should be fixed. And starting in August, I'm thinking maybe early to mid-August, we're going to relaunch the show, start doing it every week, have a dedicated time for it, and we can just really start to regularize it. I also want to start streaming on Twitch, doing all of that stuff. Talk Gaming will likely start taking place on Twitch, so if you haven't followed me on that right now, go down in the description box, follow me on Twitch. That's where it's going to be. Then we're going to upload it afterwards to YouTube for people to watch afterwards. So yeah, just a little download on what's happening and where this is going. But thank you for watching. I just wanted you to know this is not going to be the norm. We are going to go back to the regular live show once I get into a place that has strong enough internet for it. But thank you for watching. I love each and every single one of you. Let me know your thoughts on all of these news stories down in the comment section below. I will be reading through every single comment. I love you. Peace out. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.